This is video 1 of week 2, the dimensions of multilingualism. So I've already presented to you the idea that the human linguistic experience is one of being multilingual, at least in the generality of cases. Now I would like to introduce to you the different approaches, the different angles from which we have been studying the phenomenon of multilingualism. This is just to give you a general idea of the umbrella of approaches that have been proposed. It's obviously not an exhaustive list, but I'm going to present them to you in the form of the different questions that people have been posing around multilingualism. I'm going to give you just the questions. I'm going to give you a couple of pointers, but I don't intend to answer those questions, obviously, because we don't have time. And this course specifically also does not intend to respond all of those questions. But just to give you a general idea of what the possibilities are for scientific study of multilingualism. So for starts, from socio-psychological perspective, what can we ask about multilingualism? We could ask, does knowing more than one language have any consequences on the social lives of people? Does it increase their social possibility? Does it decrease their social lives? How about on the intellectual lives of people? What effect does knowing more than one language have? Or actually, the opposite, what effect does knowing only one language have on the intellectual lives of people? As for providing them access to different, for example, for different sources of knowledge and different perspectives. How about on the economic possibilities of people? Does being multilingual help you to find a job, for example, to get a better job? Is it a hindrance? Those are questions that we could ask from the socio-psychological perspective. How about the cultural lives of people? Do multilinguals have a richer cultural life? Do they have an impoverished cultural life? Those are the kind of questions that we might want to ask. How about on the artistic lives of people? Are multilinguals differently creative from monolinguals? That's just the fact of knowing more than one language. Does that make a difference? Those are the kinds of questions that people have been asking. Now, from a strictly social perspective, we could ask, how are the different languages spoken in a community perceived? What values or stereotypes are linked to each language? So communities are typically multilingual, and typically different languages are perceived in a different way in a given community. So how do communities manage their linguistic diversity will be a central question for the social perspective. Do they encourage diversity? Do they, the opposite, discourage diversity? How do they use that different languages and the values that are assigned to each language and to the speakers, especially to the speakers of such languages? How are they managed within a community? Do multilingual parents decide what language to transmit to their children? Will be central to that, because it will be a reflex of how the community is managing the linguistic diversity at the general level, but also at the micro level, at the level of the family. And eventually, how does linguistic diversity impact a community? That's like a general question of the other questions. Should it be encouraged or discouraged? What are the consequences of encouraging speaking different languages or promoting the acquisition and the use of only one of those languages? Now, going from the social or community perspective to more the individual perspective, we can ask several questions about the cognitive perspective regarding multilingualism. For example, does speaking more than one language have any cognitive effects? That would be like the general one. So by the mere fact that you have more than one language, is your mind different from those people, that cognitive reality of having only one language. Do we acquire two or more languages in the same way as just one? Are babies faced with the task of acquiring several linguistic systems? Do they do it differently from the ones who who encounter only one linguistic system that they have to acquire? Then a related question is, how are multilingual grammars represented in the brain? Represented here meaning enacted in the brain. Are they, when you have more than one linguistic system, which is more than one linguistic grammar in your brain, does that have any effect on the system itself? Probably because of interactions between the different systems and so on. And at the other side of the spectrum, do the cognitive effects of multilingualism, if there are any, carry on throughout life, on to old age? We know that exercising your brain, like exercising your body, might have consequences on the inevitable decadence or decline, not decadence, decline of that of any part of your body, and the brain is not any different. So does having that extra exercise on the brain have any impact on aging, on the effects of aging? Then narrowing it down a little more, from the strictly linguistic perspective, we could ask whether multilingual grammars differ from monolingual ones. By the mere fact of having more than one and having more than one system, linguistic systems in your mind, and having those interact, if they do interact indeed. So how do they differ? Can we compare that? How is the grammar of an English speaker who only speaks English different from the grammar of an English speaker who speaks English and some other languages? Now, how is multilingual speech, especially the issue of accent? Do multilinguals keep language separate? Accent maybe is just a clear sign that multilinguals do not keep their languages all that separate, but they influence each other, even at the level of speaking them. Now, how do multilingual people make use of their linguistic repertoire? Because they have more than one system. How do they use all of them together if they need to, or if they so want to do it, for example? Now, does multilingual competence change throughout life? Do we acquire a system and the system stays fixed in your brain, in your mind, or can it evolve throughout life? Do we forget a language? If we don't use it anymore, do we acquire a new language? And how do those processes develop? How does learning a new language impact the ones we already know? So if we acquire a new language, that's a new linguistic system, what happens to the one that we have acquired prior to that? Does it get affected by that one, etc.? These are questions that are made from the perspective of a dynamic view of multilingual competence, meaning a view in which our language development changes throughout life. It's not fixed at a certain point of development, like a growth, for example, at least in tallness. It is fixed at a given moment pretty much, and you never grow beyond the last time that you had a growth spurt. In language, we think that you evolve your linguistic competence throughout life, the same way that you develop your personality throughout life, and so on. This is, of course, related to an atomistic versus holistic approach to multilingualism. In linguistics, you have scholars that take more of an atomistic approach. What are the nitty-gritty details of the system and how they get affected by having more than one linguistic system in your mind, versus the holistic approach to multilingualism that takes into account issues of, for example, communication and representation, of conceptual representation, and so on, right? And another term that is very salient in today's linguistic perspective in the study of multilingualism is this label translanguaging, which has to do with how multilinguals use the whole repertoire, the whole linguistic repertoire that they have. Whenever I put these terms in a box, as you can see here with translanguaging, dynamic view, atomistic, etc., this means that those are technical terms that you should pay attention to in the readings mostly, because those will be concepts that will be key for the understanding of the study of multilingualism. So it's on you to take those terms and then identify them in the readings. The one from this week is Thenod's reading, and to make sure that you are clear on their meaning. And if you are not, then please ask me during class or in seminar. Up to here for the first video, and look at the readings up to here, and then see you in the next video.